I'm just wondering
Go
if
ahead.
there's any place where there's been success. Have there been, because it almost sounds like, okay, if we just look at all the countries in Europe and compare them to the United States, and we're all kind of in the same boat where we've just got these crazy people who are able to get these guns and then go and shoot up schools or shoot up concerts. What can be done? Is there any place that has solved this problem, or at least really lowered it, where per capita it's much lower?
Right. Well, I mean, I think Israel for many years had success on the stuff.
What did they do?
But well, there are basically three periods of time that you can look at for Israel. Obviously, they've had terrorist attacks prior to even them being formed as a country. But up until 1972, civilians were banned from being able to go and carry guns. And you just saw terrorist attack after terrorist attack. And what the government would do in those times would be to go and arm, put more police, more military on the streets. But what they discovered is that no matter how much money they spent, they simply couldn't cover all the targets that were there. That terrorists had these huge tactical advantages, like we were talking about before with the school or something. They could go, if you had a police officer on a bus, they could wait for the officer to leave, or they could go and pick another target, or they could try to take out the officer first.
Hmm.
After 1972, they started allowing civilians to carry concealed handguns. And so, in the United States, outside of New York and California, you have about 10.5% of the adult population with a concealed carry permit. You go to a restaurant or a movie theater or a grocery store or a mall, it's very likely that the person next to you is carrying a concealed handgun. You would never know. The
Yeah.
terrorists don't know. And so you could have 30 people behind you on the bus, and you don't know which one or two or three or four of them might be armed and be able to go and stop you. And so they go and pull out their gun and try to shoot the police officer on the bus. They reveal their position, and now they have to worry that somebody behind them is going to be able to go and stop them. So you had about 14% of the adult population, and you saw big changes in how they did these terrorist attacks. The problem is that Israel has had the same type of gun control debate that we've had here in the United States. You go and look at, in September of this year, you had the newspapers in the country reporting that the national police had said, look, the high holidays are coming up. Please, anybody who's allowed to carry, make sure you carry at all times. But you had politicians on the left who were saying, look, it's dangerous to let civilians carry guns. And up until very recently, only about 3% now of the adult Jewish population was legally licensed to have a gun, because there had been this push to make it more restrictive over time to do it. And I mean, you can only imagine how things might have turned out differently at the music festival if some
somebody
people
was,
had been allowed to hear. Or
yeah,
you
no
look at the
doubt.
different kibbutzes. There's only one kibbutz really that I know of where, despite the law at the time, the safety officer there had gone into the armory and passed out guns to members of the kibbutz, whether they were licensed or not, to be able to go and have them. And they got some news coverage how they were able to stop the terrorist attack and save the lives there. Otherwise, you have all these stories about people huddling in places, and basically just having to wait for the terrorists to come in and kill them.
Right.
And so, the day after the October 7th attack, the national security minister changed the rules for people
Right.
being licensed to have guns. I wish they had done it a week or a month earlier. Things
Right.
might have been very different in many of the places that were there. But look, we can just look in the United States. We have 20 states that allow teachers and staff to be able to go and carry at schools. Okay, and it varies. In some states like Utah and New Hampshire, any teacher who has a concealed carry permit is allowed to carry. In other states like Texas or Oklahoma, where you have about 40% of the schools having armed teachers and staff, it's up to the principals or the school boards in order to make those decisions. Since 2000, every single attack at a school, a shooting where anybody's been wounded or killed, has occurred in places where guns are banned, where teachers and staff aren't allowed to carry. There's not been one single attack during school hours where teachers and staff are allowed to carry where anybody's been wounded or killed. And, so the question is, do you have a sign in front of the school that says this school is a gun-free zone? Or do you have a sign in front of the school that says warning to these killers that select teachers and staff at this school are able to go and carry and will use their guns to protect the students and others that are there? Again, these guys may be crazy in some sense, but they're not stupid. If their goal is to get media coverage and you make them know that somebody will be there quickly, that they won't be able to identify beforehand to be able to go and stop them, then they're going to be convinced that they're not going to be able to kill that many people, and they're not going to get the media coverage that they're going to get. I can give you so many cases on our website at crimeresearch.org. In just the last few years, we have like 40 cases around the country where police have said that there would have been a mass public shooting if it hadn't been for the presence of a concealed carry permit holder. I'll give you a few examples, or a couple examples that you wouldn't have heard about. So the Pulse nightclub shooting. At the time, it was the worst mass public shooting in the United States. It was in Florida. 1 week after that, there was an attack at a nightclub in South Carolina. 3 people were shot. A 4th person was being shot at when a concealed carry permit holder pulled out his gun and seriously wounded the attacker, ending the attack. The attacker still had something like 125 rounds of ammunition on him when he was stopped. Well, what's the difference between Florida and South Carolina? Florida was one of 10 states that banned permanent concealed handguns in establishments that get more than 50% of their revenue from alcohol. South Carolina was one of the 40 states that allowed people to carry. The Florida case was still getting massive international news coverage a week after the attack. And yet you will look in vain to find national news coverage about the South Carolina attack. Now, why wasn't that newsworthy? The fact that it was stopped there, very similar type of attack there. You take the Parkland shooting. Just months after that, there was another attempted attack at an elementary school very near the Parkland shooting that was there. It was in a park right next to the school. You had hundreds of students there, their parents, the teachers. A man came up and started firing his gun. Fortunately, because it was in a park and not in a school, people were allowed to carry permitted concealed handguns. There was a vendor there who had his permitted concealed handguns. He quickly shot and wounded the attacker before anybody else was shot. Again, there's like no national news coverage on that. You were still getting coverage well after that about the Parkland shooting. Why wasn't that newsworthy? You have a hero in both of these cases, saving God knows how many lives that are there. Surely if the people hadn't been there, what would the news coverage have been?
Right.